Good evening. I'm Al, and I am joined by a very special guest, Erick Ybarra, who just came over from Lofton Stream. He did a good show there, so check that one out after this live stream. And today we are talking about a very, very important topic, and that topic is the Photian Schism or the Photian. I'm curious, is it pronounced the Photian or Photian Schism? I've heard both.
Yep, I've heard both. I've heard some Greek Orthodox people say it's Photius, um, but for the life of me, I've heard other experts say Photius, so I
Hmm.
just go with Photius because that seems to be the norm.
Okay.
But I hear Photius sometimes, you know.
Yeah, I know James Lakutis says Photius, and he's Greek.
Yeah.
Um, so the Photian schism. So if you guys watch my channel, Mr. Erick Ybarra is no stranger to this channel. We've had him on 2 or 3 or 4 times, and to talk about papacy, filioque, Melchizedek, you name it, we've talked about it, and we're going to complement all that with um, this episode on the Photian schism. Now, this episode is not too relevant to Protestants, although they may find it interesting. Not too relevant to Oriental Orthodox, although again they may find it interesting. But in terms of the Latin and the Greek Orthodox Church, it's a very controversial subject that's been debated since it happened almost. And so are you all set to talk about the Photian schism?
Yeah. Feel free to stop me to ask questions or anything you'd like, and or if somebody from the audience needs to have something answered before I move on, just let me know. But
Sure.
what makes this very difficult is there's been a huge shift in scholarship on Photius, especially with the Czech theologian, the late Father Francis Devornick, historical theologian. Those of you who, yes, there you go. Oh wow, yeah. See, I have a soft paperback copy. Mine, I would love. I actually came across. This is, by the way, for the listeners. This is the author I'm talking about, Francis Devornick, and he wrote a book called The Photian Schism, which is the book that Alan is holding up in hardcover. I'm holding up the softcover version here.
Yeah, and
I
I just want to say it's kind of off topic, but I got mine purchasing plus shipping $20 Canadian, and this was from the
Wow,
Oxford Library. It's
that's crazy. I actually was in Minnesota one evening, and I had some spare time in the evening, and I just drove into the city looking for a bookstore, and I found one, and I was just going through this bookstore left and right, and it was one of those bookstores that is so messy, and there's books on the floor, but like they're heavy books. From like antique books, and then out of nowhere I see Devornick's The Photian Schism, large hardback, all full of dust, and guy was selling it for I think $150.
I
Yeah.
prefer the price I paid for it.
Well, this one I think you could probably get on Amazon, not that much actually. um, and it does me good. So whenever this one wears out, I'll probably buy a couple more. But anyway, largely speaking, prior to Dvornik, um, it had been thought that that Photius was like the Byzantine version of Martin Luther, the one who sort of set off the fireworks for the Greek schism with the Latins, kind of like Luther, nailing his 95 thesis to the Cathedral Church of Wittenberg. Photius, starts this schism with his accusations of heresies against the Latins and against the papacy. And very good scholars held to this view, and it's because a lot of the documentation that was being observed was from a lot of anti-Photian literature that seems to take up a lot of the volume of the historical record. And so if you read like the works of Saint Robert Bellarmine, for example, or even Hergenrother, one of the cardinals, who he was a Catholic historical theologian. He wrote quite a bit. Francis Devornick he's coming off the tails of Hergenrother, and slightly correcting Hergenrother. So Hergenrother kind of represents the older view, the more up-to-date older view of and Grumel. There's another historical theologian, Frenchman, I think. Grumel wrote several historical works. He was a Byzantinist, and he's actually contemporary to Devornick, and he actually took some disagreements from Devornick, because he thought Devornick was just a little tad bit too pro-Photius, which I actually agree with. I think that Devornick might be just a little bit too ambitious to keep a good reputation for Photius. That's I'm going to go ahead. That's me speaking there. But if we go back to the objective history, I'm not a scholar, like a historical scholar like Devornick or Grumel or Hergenrother or Richard Price, or like the author of the recent commentary on the Council of Constantinople 861, Federico Montenero. I stand in no comparison to their credentials. So I'm in debt to give the objectivity of the most recent scholarship. But I will give a couple of my own takeaways, because I have the freedom of speech.
Yeah, because I mean, a scholar at the end of the day is just an opinion,
Absolutely, yeah.
He's got some letters behind his name, but that doesn't mean you're right all the time. You could be right, but as Timothy Flanders has said, a true theologian is a man of God who prays. He may have all the fancy degrees, but he has to be a holy man too. And so, like, I'm not necessarily making judgments on these people, but I mean that is a prerequisite. So you're going to add some of your opinion.
Yeah, I'll add some stuff, and I'm sure that some of the listeners will say, that's kind of, might be stretching a little bit. But we'll start off with, Devornick's reform of the Photian memory is basically what we could say here. But, Francis Devornick actually started off. Don't forget the brave example of Pastor Jim. Good one. But Devornick starts off in his early career taking on the Hergenrothian view of Photius, but with his own research, with his own digging into the original sources, especially into some corroborating literature in the pontificates that come after John VIII, during the ascendancy of Emperor Leo IV, I believe. He changed his view. But initially, he thought of Photius basically the standard view. Photius rejected the papacy. He condemned the Latins, lumped Rome into the Filioque group of heretics, and basically died outside of communion with the Holy Catholic Church.
Yeah.
But with rereading, he came to see, in the end, no, Photius actually died in the peace of the church. So we'll see why and how that is. But Photius himself was a man of noble birth. He was a genius scholar. He held the chair of philosophy at the University of Constantinople. He was, as Dr. William Marshner said, and I think I concur, he was a polymath. He was a wide variety of learning. And he ended up being a career man, a civil servant in Byzantium. No one would have projected him to be a cleric one day. But we'll see how that ended up happening. He was a nephew. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Just a quick question. So then, yes, like I know he's kind of thrust into the position of patriarch. They ordained him in like 2 days or something. And so he was a single man. He didn't have a wife and family.
No.
Okay.
No, see, that was the other thing. Recently, I was talking to an Eastern Orthodox friend of mine, and he said that he just doesn't understand the idea of priestly celibacy. But it's good to make mention that the Greek Orthodox always held the celibacy of the episcopate, especially of the patriarchate. So yeah, no, you had to be a celibate to be in the supreme pontificate of the office of bishop. Yeah.
Last I checked, Patriarch Bartholomew, head of the Greek Church, doesn't have a wife.
Yes. Now, at this time, I think they still had married men, but I think according to the canons of Trullo, they had to buy a house for the wife to live somewhere else if they were going to be ordained a bishop. So, but as far as I know, Photius is not married. But in any case, another fact that should be known is that he's the nephew of Tarasius of Constantinople. He was the patriarch of Constantinople at the Council of Nicaea 787. So he's of noble birth. He has a close association with preeminent iconodule blood. He's definitely a supporter of the Council of Nicaea 787, totally against the iconoclasts, and took a moderate view, because at this time, this is one of the things that needs to be understood, is that iconoclasm, or let's say those who rejected the veneration of icons, that seemed to have lingered longer and longer. So it really didn't go anywhere after 787. It rekindled itself, and it took the imperial intervention of 843 to really put it to death. That's the day that the Orthodox today continue to thank as the Sunday of Orthodoxy. But even after 843, you have some lingering people who reject the iconoclasts. And then you've got another split between the moderates and the radicals. So you had those radical iconodules. So they were not just for the icons. They were like, you've got to do it this way. It's got to be done all the time. And we have to punish those who have a lower view or a lesser view of what to do with icons. And
so
then the
I
moderates.
think I was going to say, I think a good analogy of the whole situation, that like the second Council of Nicaea is very similar to the first Council of Nicaea. Boom, it's condemned, but it's not like it completely extinguishes it. It takes a while to apply that council to beat down the heresy. It takes about a century. Took about 3/4 of a century with Nicaea 1, and it sounds like it's taken about just as much for Nicaea 2.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. So we have to understand that Constantinople is still struggling with this issue, and by this time you have the ascendancy of a young child whose father passed away. His father was emperor. Michael III comes into the Byzantine throne. But he's too young to know what's going on. So Theodora, his mother, takes over the regency. And, so she's answering questions, and she's kind of leading the Byzantine theocracy in place of Michael III and in place of her deceased husband. And she wants to clean up Constantinople, and she wants to have somebody who supports images in the office of patriarch. So she was able to get Ignatius to be ordained as the patriarch of Constantinople. And so this man is also an interesting figure, has a history as well. But he he took a position, I think it was a more a radical view on the icons. And meaning he was a hard liner, I think is what I think is what the issue is. And he eventually ran into some conflict with a replacement to Theodora, which was the uncle of Michael III. And his name was Bardus. So once Michael III got old enough, he was able to get Bardus, who was his uncle, into the regency to replace his mother Theodora. And so instead of Theodora and Michael III, now you have Bardus and Michael III. And as Byzantine documents show, Michael III was not a very righteous man.
No.
He's particularly called the drunkard, because of his frisky living and drunken habits. But Bardus was also not known to be a saint either, his uncle. So it seems like we've got two kind of twisted persons in the leadership there at the Chancery of Constantinople. And the records have it that Bardus had an incestuous relationship, and that once Ignatius got whiff of that, he refused to give communion indefinitely to Bardus. And some of the records say that that's what launched this whole campaign against Ignatius, because Ignatius embarrasses Bardus. Bardus is basically the highest person next to the emperor, and he can't receive Holy Communion in the Byzantine theocracy. That's absurd. So Ignatius is a problem. Other historians, I think, have said that like this Federico Montenero, he doesn't really give a lot of traction to that theory. He thinks there was a lot in the backstory about Ignatius and problems that brew as a result of his policy on icons and the policy of Bardus and Michael III. And so whatever happened, what we know is that Ignatius was either forced out of his patriarchate. So there's, some of the pro Ignatian sources will say that, Ignatius was mistreated, sent into exile, and they left him out there until he finally voluntarily resigned. And other people think that there was just so many people against him that he finally just willfully resigned. And so a lot of this hinges on the genuineness of Ignatius's preliminary resignation. I
think it's worth pointing out, although it's not super well known, Ignatius is actually a saint in both Catholic and Orthodox churches.
Yes, he is.
Yes, I've actually got a biography of him. I don't have it here; it's on my shelf somewhere. But he's a good, solid saint, and So I just
no problem. He is a saint. And he that ties into the story here. But Ignatius got out of office, and they found the scholar of the day, lecture giver, philosophizing Photius, a man of erudite scholarship. He was versatile in language and in linguistics. And so he's brought in as a moderate. He's a moderate on icons. definitely interested in making sure that Nicaea 787 gets reaffirmed. Again, that's also looming in the background. What's the status of Nicaea 787? So Photius comes in, and I don't remember if it was the same day or in 1 week where they made him a reader and then ran him through all all offices, subdeacon, all the way through bishop to patriarch. Um, well, that's questionable. All the records don't. None of the records pro Photius, pro Ignatian, speak well of that. They obviously come to the defense of it. Appealing to Ambrose and to Razius as precedents, but that is highly questionable Byzantine. Byzantine exception, and so Patriarch Photius now is in the office of Constantinople. Well, eventually, the next step in the story is that in comes all these petitions to bring Ignatius back to the throne. There's a question as to whether he really did resign. Did he really resign? Did he not really resign? Is Photius the man we thought he was going to be? Is he not the man we thought he was going to be? In any case, Photius thought it was time to write to the Apostolic See. So Photius at this point is viewing Rome as a potential help to the situation in Constantinople. And, so he writes to Pope Nicholas, with all the pleasantries, head of the churches and yada yada yada.
So is it okay if I pause for a second, because
Yeah,
I should point
absolutely.
out there's a huge current of scholarship both in Catholic, Orthodox, and Protestant who say this same thing, where the Latin Church believed in the papacy, but the Greek Church they kind of only believed in it if they needed it. It's like, oh, we need something from the Pope, we'll send a letter, throw Matthew 16 and Luke 22 at him, and let's hope he comes down on my side. Oh, the Pope, there's a huge current of scholarship that says that. I'm not saying I agree with that. I don't know if Erick does or not, but there's a huge current of scholarship that says that. Most famously, John Meyendorff. So
yeah, well, it's difficult to say, right? I mean, we're trying to do one of the words that Montenero uses throughout the book, which I think is really good, is that what we're doing is we're trying to reconstruct the story of Photius. And it's not always easy because the literature is contradictory. But I would say to that question, just briefly, so that lest we take up too much time on that, is that there's something to that. There's got to be something to that idea that the Byzantines gave outward toleration to the papal supremacy when they thought it was going to help. When they thought the Pope was not going to help, they felt free to basically reject it. That's not answering the view of every Byzantine. That's some of the Byzantines. I mean, we could even say that there's some in the West that didn't believe in the papacy internally, but they did believe it externally, as long as it suited them well. I think Charlemagne is a candidate for that.
yeah.
I think that some of the Frankish theologians, I think but the thing is that wouldn't represent everybody. Then you've got Hincmar of Reims.
I was just going to bring him up. I was just thinking of Hinchmar.
Yeah, you've got Hincmar. You've got another one he came before Hincmar. He's known to be like one of the most influential theologians of the court at Charlemagne. Oh boy, the name is escaping me, but I'm
talking
sure
about Alcuin.
Yes, Saint Alcuin, who's venerated by the Catholics. The pre-schism West, he was a saint. He went down in blessed memory. But anyhow, so that's my short answer to that question. It all depends on who you're talking about. And so I guess we could return to that, But anyway, let's get back to 858. 858, 859 is where you've got this resignation of Photius, and then a subsequent
of Ignatius.
of Ignatius. Sorry. Woo.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for correcting me. Yes, Ignatius. And then Photius writes to Rome. It falls into the lap of Nicholas, who we find to be a rather careful pope who wants to see things done the right way. And Michael III simultaneously writes a letter with Photius. Michael III's concern is icons and the status of Nicaea 787. So Michael III wants to call an ecumenical synod or some kind of synod to be held in the imperial domain um, to settle this issue once and for all. Again, once and for all, and the next time perhaps once and for all. It was always a matter of let's get this done once and for all. It seems like everything was always open for requestioning back in the East at this time. But so into the lap of Nicholas is Michael III's letter and then Photius's letter. Well, Nicholas reads this and says, "What? A civil man was working in the civil state becomes a patriarch in a week?" That's a huge no-no in Rome. People, Pope Hadrian I had already hit the roof when this happened with Tarasius at Nicaea 787. So Rome does not like it when the Byzantines do this. So Nicholas is hard to come easy with Photius as the patriarch. That's not going to be a settled fact in the Roman archives until Nicholas is satisfied investigating the matter. In addition, he's okay with sending legates to Constantinople to discuss the issue of Nicaea 787, which for Nicholas, like Hadrian I, comes with two stipulations. The first is the return of the papal patrimonies, Calabria, Sicily, southern Italy, and the Illyricum diocese. These were confiscated, as you know, Alan, at the Leo the Isaurian, Leo III, the Emperor of Byzantium, who, in retaliation to Pope Gregory II's iconodualism, took those territories away, which also included the confiscation of the funds that those churches used to send to Rome to support the candle making in Rome. Well, that was one stipulation, and obviously the second stipulation was that the incoming Bulgarians who were making headway south into Thrace and Macedonia, that's territory that used to belong to Rome, and so Rome looked at this as new, fresh missionary territory, and so Rome wanted its classical territory back. So Nicholas sends legates to Constantinople. They have a synod there in 861. Like today, we could have a Zoom discussion. It wasn't like that back then. They had to do some long traveling. So keep in mind, if we were there at this time, it would take long bits to get the story that's all stretched out, put into a compact version like we're doing here. But at 861, Photius is basically confirmed as the patriarch. What happened, how it happened, that's a long story. We don't have time to go into that. But the legates go back to Rome and say, Photius is a great guy. He's the patriarch. Ignatius is a bad guy. Well, Nicholas was like, what? And nothing was resolved? There was no... the manner in which it was done wasn't satisfying to Nicholas. Now, some historians think that Nicholas should have squashed it right there.
Wait. Just pause. I want to clarify something. So,
Yeah.
Are we talking about Constantinople 861 at this point?
Yes. The Council of Constantinople 861, which the Greek Orthodox scholarship today sometimes refers to as the Synod of the First Second Synod, which it's because there was two sessions that were quite separate from each other. The first session was, quite long. Second session was quite separate. They call it the first second. And I think that made its way into the rudder. So today it's got standing for the Orthodox. But Rome rejected it. And when Photius and Michael III found out about that, they basically wrote some scathing letters to Rome, and in retaliation to that, Pope Nicholas went ahead and said, "No, here in Rome, the real patriarch of Constantinople is Ignatius, and Photius is an imposter,
a usurper." Yeah,
a usurper. Yeah, yes, sorry, usurper. And so that's what happens there in 863. That's in 863. Nicholas holds a council in Rome, and that's temporarily there's a break in communications between Rome and Constantinople. In comes Boris, the Khan of the Bulgars, making his depository in Thrace, Macedonia, and areas near the classical diocese of Thessaly and its oversight in the Illyricum. And Boris shows some initial interests in wanting to make a Church of Bulgaria. And initially, he's more open to the Latins coming in and, him becoming like a little Bulgarian patriarch, sort of, autonomous, but under the Western oversight. Well, Thrace is very close to Constantinople. And
very
this
close.
was very close. And so in Byzantium, this was like, absurd for Latin missionaries to be traveling all that way to conduct missionary, work there. So this is when, around the time 867, Photius grabs his mighty pen and starts to write his errors against the Latins. Yeah.
Okay, and just to make sure, this is not the same thing as the mystagogy of the Holy Spirit.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm pretty
That's
sure.
what I thought too.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the mystagogy was written like 13 years after all this. But some people date the mystagogy earlier. It's it's one of those things we're trying to have to reconstruct from time to time. But so yeah, there's a synod that's held in 867. That's where we're at in the story.
Mm-hmm.
And at this synod, Photius excommunicates Pope Nicholas because he's eating cheese and eggs in Lent. They fast on Saturdays. There's a whole list of problems, but the biggest issue is the addition of the filioque in the creed, which Byzantine missionaries overheard and saw the Latins doing in Bulgaria. And so this was a cause for concern for Photius. And so he writes the great encyclical in 867, sends it to all the patriarchs with all, the Byzantine lists condemning the Latins and all that. So
Mm-hmm.
Nicholas is excommunicated. And so this is, this is what happens there. Another breakdown in communications between Rome and Constantinople until there is a change in the imperial palace. That seems to be what kickstarts things in Constantinople. So the records show that somehow a Macedonian named Basil came into enough influence as co-emperor and had Bardus assassinated and Michael III killed. I hesitate on that because I'd hate to go on the record accusing Basil of doing this, but it seems as though that's what the histories are saying. Okay.
And again, I just want to make a clarification. This is not Basil the Olgar Slayer. This is an earlier Basil. This is Basil
Yeah.
the First.
Yeah. This is the beginning of the Macedonian dynasty in the in the Byzantine Empire. And it depletes. It takes away the Isaurian dynasty. The last man was Michael III. So the Isaurians are out. In come the Macedonians, Basil the First, and he's not happy with Photius, and so he writes to Rome to sort of set things afresh. Now there's tons of motivations here. Don't have enough time to go into this, but he writes to Rome and basically says, "Hey, we've basically pulled off the shelf all of Nicholas's letters against Photius. We realize that we've neglected the authority of the Apostolic See. We're writing to you now to finally get this thing fixed. Why don't we hold a council in Constantinople? You decide what should be done, and you send legates, and we'll get it done." That is the Council of Constantinople 869. And it opened up, I think, October or November 869. And at this council, the instructions were basically simple. Pope Hadrian II, who was succeeded Nicholas, he basically said, look, this is what needs to happen. Okay. Number one, the same stipulations that Hadrian I and Nicholas said need to be abided by, which regarding the patrimonies of Calabria, Sicily, and southern Italy. I'm missing one. Illyricum. Yes, Illyricum. Illyricum, the diocese has to come back to oversight of the Roman Patriarchate, and Photius has to be rejected, and all those bishops that went along with Photius, they can come back into communion with the church if they sign a libellus, basically saying they repent of following Photius, or those who were ordained by Ignatius and then they began to follow Photius, they have to repent. And then those who were ordained by Photius have to repent of being under him. And so this was the libellus satisfactionis. It was looked at as all you Byzantines that were supporting Photius will have to openly repent during this council, And I mean, the penance that Pope Hadrian II demanded was like 100 prostrations saying Kyrie eleison, 100 prayers that Our Fathers, I think 100 Our Fathers, and it was
So that's like attending a single divine liturgy. Then, since they say Kyrie eleison every
right,
8 seconds,
yeah, they might have thought that was simple, right?
they're like, all right, I'll finish that off this Sunday.
Yeah, so 869 gets conducted. Photius is condemned. Photius, he stands trial, but he sticks to his guns that he's innocent. And all the accusations from Rome and the pro-Ignatian party meaning in Constantinople at this time, with the support of Basil, the emperor, you've got a community of people who support Ignatius, and then you've got a people in Constantinople who support Photius. What we'll find out is that the Ignatian party was much, much smaller than had been previously thought in Rome. The support for Photius was quite great, became the majority. So 869, gets done, and this council has all kinds of squirrely things going on too. The Byzantines don't ever cooperate quite too easily. The Roman legates had the copy of the Acts stolen from them, both in Constantinople and mid-sea, transmarina. The pirates took the Acts from the Roman legates. And if it were not for Anastasius Bibliothecarius, I always
Now
have to
that's a name.
I always have to pause before I say his name, because it's not really his name. Bibliothecarius just means the librarian. So Anastasius was he's got a little bit of a history too, but we don't have time to go into that. He is the chief librarian of the Roman archives, and he knew that the Byzantines can be a little squirrely. So he actually made his own copy of the acts of this council. So if it weren't for him, we would have never had any acts to this council to translate.
Because the 9th century version of Calico Jack tried to steal
So the Byzantine, again, the story is perspectival, so I don't want to make it look like all these Byzantines were evil people, but some fishy business was going on, and there's just no way to deny that. So where are we now? So what's next after this is by the way, it's very important to recognize that at this Council of Constantinople 869, you've got some of the most clear and emphatic statements of papal supremacy and papal infallibility out of all the councils prior, except for maybe Constantinople 681. That one's a little bit even. That one's more clear.
Is it more than Pope Agatho's letter?
No, I would say Agatho's letters a little bit more explicit than this council's rehearsal of the papal claims. But what you see in the Acts is definitely, the Byzantines kind of defending themselves too a little bit. Does Rome really have the right to do this? Does Rome really have the right to do this? And the Roman legates are like, yes, Rome has a right to do this. It's never been thought that that the Apostolic See gets judged by anyone, right? This council has tons of statements on the inability to judge the Roman pontiff and the supremacy of the chair of Peter due to the voice of Christ in the Gospel of Matthew. Anyhow, this council gets wrapped up. It's thought to have been successful. Montenero doesn't believe that Pope Hadrian actually ratified the council. So this is quite interesting. Any of the listeners who eventually have a garage sale to get this book, because I'm telling you, it takes a lot to muster up the savings to get these Brill books. But on page 47, Montenero says, yet a reader who looked further for secure evidence for our councils at any time being regarded as the 8th ecumenical councils in those popes' official documents would be disappointed. So Montenero does not think that it was ratified by Hadrian II as ecumenical. There's a lot we can go into with regard to that. I'm sure people will bring it up in the questions, because it seems like nowadays the new coin that's being flipped around by the Orthodox or sometimes the Anglicans is the whole 869, 879 dilemma for Rome. But we'll get to that later, I think.
Yeah, we're getting that. That's on my list of questions. So
Okay.
just take your time. We'll get there eventually.
Yeah. But what ends up happening in Constantinople is that Photius just has too many supporters. So Ignatius gets put back on the throne by this council, 869. And, Photius has too many supporters. And Basil is the emperor, but, you can have ultimate authority like an emperor, but if the people are just not cooperative, it gets to the point where you start to have to bend your own knee to the people's demands. And I think Basil warmed up to Photius. I mean, he brings him. Go ahead.
Well, I heard somewhere, I can't remember where, but I knew as soon as they deposed Photius, they threw him in a monastery, and he found out, like, again, correct me if I'm wrong. Oh, we got our good friend Mr. Flanders here.
Oh, Timothy Flanders. Hey, how are you, brother?
Hey, how are you, man? God bless. Thanks for joining us. So I think Photius, he's in the monastery. Again, I could be wrong. If this is completely wrong, to say so. Um, uh, he did some research and he found out Basil was descendant of our kings from Armenia, and then he showed it to him and he gained his favor by that. Ooh, I'm descendant of kings from Armenia, or something like that. Am I completely wrong?
You know, I have not privy to that detail.
Oh, okay.
All I
Something we can
know.
do.
so, I'm not privy to that detail. What I do know is that Basil ended up, recognizing that Photius just had too much support for him,
Mhm.
and eventually, invited him to give lectures in philosophy, and to even catechize his children, because Photius was known for being such a good, a scholar. Well, here's where the sources go. Here's where Devornick, for example, uh, graduates from Hergenrother, and that is that somewhere between 870 and 876 ish, there's a reconciliation between Ignatius and Photius, and this happens unbeknownst to Rome. And Ignatius dies, and by this time, Basil had put Photius back on the back on the patriarchal throne, and so Photius is put right back into position. And Emperor Basil thinks that enough of this can be cleared up by learning exactly what happened, because the idea is that what happened at 869 was a travesty due to a lack of the facts, a lack of knowing exactly what happened with Ignatius, and due to a lack of knowledge as to what happened with Photius. And at this time, you've got John VIII on the papal throne, and he's a man who's ready to reconcile with Constantinople. They're tired of this separation. They're tired of what's going on in Byzantium. At the same time, um, the Saracens are, they are threatening Italian territory, and so it's politically expedient for John VIII to seek out Byzantine cooperation. So there was some political motivations possibly. If we want to give him the best benefit of the doubt, they were simply godly motives. John VIII wanted to bring healing to Constantinople, which at this time it wasn't viewed as a Constantinople versus Rome problem that was there, obviously, with Photius and Nicholas. But at this time, Constantinople itself was divided. The Ignatian legacy still stuck out, and the Photian legacy still stuck out. And so John VIII he sent legates, to Constantinople. And here's another situation where the documents go awry. You've got a Latin version and a Greek version of the documents, and they're not the same.
Oh, that never happens, no, does it?
What seems to be the case, and Father Francis Devornick, he surveys the evidence for this, is that Photius or some sort of cooperative redactor with Photius changed the papal letters that were sent in, and it was justified on the basis that when Hadrian II was originally informed about the goings on in Constantinople, he lacked a sufficient Photian witness. In fact, when when Basil came into power, he sent a legation to Rome so that Hadrian can learn what's going on. And one of the legates, whose name was Peter, he was on a boat to Rome. He was of the Photian legation, so he was there to defend his friend Photius. The other legates were on different boats. They were for Ignatius. Well, Peter's boat sunk and he died. So the only people who got to Rome were the pro-Ignatian party, and then one that was supposedly neutral, I believe. So it's thought that John VIII only got the pro-Ignatian story. So that way, John VIII was persuaded wrongfully because there wasn't the other side to be heard. And Photius thinks that Rome was innocently misled. And as a result of that, the Council of 869 was just a complete mess up. It was just a complete launched off of false understandings. This is Devornick, okay? This is his rehearsal of the events, graduating from the Hergenrothian view and prior to that in the scholarship, especially the Catholic scholarship. So he rewrites the papal letters and frames it in such a way that the Council of 869 was wrong altogether because I mean the whole council was there to basically depose Photius, to make sure that Nicholas's original decrees against Photius were carried out. But to the Byzantines at this point, obviously the Photian party making up the majority, this was an act of injustice. The Council of 869, 870 was an act of injustice. And so now the facts are known, and the legates of Rome they become convinced that that is the case, and that the Ignatian story was sort of muddled. And then Ignatius is dead by then, right? So he's not even there anymore. So the legates go along with the sort of the revising of the papal documents. And so there's this council in 879, 880. That's what we're talking about, if I didn't already mention it. Council of 879. Here at this council, they basically nullify the Council of 869, restore Photius to the patriarchal throne. He's back in good graces with the church. Emperor's happy. Photius is happy. The majority of the population in Constantinople is happy. The only people who are unhappy are the minority party, the pro-Ignatian party. And there's several names to this. I can't remember them off the top of my head. And if I did, I probably wouldn't be here because I'd be smart enough to know how to do something better with my life. There's so many Greek names there to remember. I just can't. So that council gets wrapped up, and John VIII hears back from his legates. Photius is back on the throne. Everything's okay, but he notices that the letters were changed. He notices that his instructions were changed.
Uh-oh.
Yes, and so here we have the Grumel versus Devornick tension on how to understand this council. Did John VIII ratify the complete annulment of the Council of 869? Most historians, so for example, hitherto, Johann Meyer has the leading text on the scholarship in this, in English, that's been translated into English on the Council of 879. It's called a Successful Council of Reunion. If you can find, I have a hard copy of it. It's extremely difficult to find. If you can get it, you're very lucky. It took me a very
What's it
long
called
time.
again? Sorry.
It's called a Successful Council of Reunion. I just had it in my hands, and I put it up. Boy, this is terrible. I need to remember that in the morning of I do my shows, I need to get all the books off of my shelf that I'm going to refer to, so that way I'm not wasting time here trying to look through my messy bookshelf.
While you're taking a look, I just want to say something about the chat, guys. I know, I know there's a lot of Anglican Catholic debates going on. If you want, I'll bring on Father James, and you can ask him all the questions you want. That would be a lot better than that right now. But now we're talking about Photius, so I mean, preferably, like, I can't control the chat, but preferably talk about the topic. If you're not interested in the topic, you can go elsewhere. But if you want, I'll bring Father James on, and you guys can cross-examine him.
Yeah, I'm a former Anglican. I love the Anglicans.
Oh, there you go.
I have a lot of affinity for the Anglican patrimony. Obviously, I'm in the Anglican ordinary. Anyway, before we get too off base here, I cannot find that. But yeah, it's called A Successful Council of Reunion by Johann Meyer. So that's Johannn Meyer, Maijer. And he takes the position that John VIII, he was okay with the annulment of the Council of 869. That's how I read him. But he does qualify it. He says it's possible he didn't, but it looks like he did based upon what he said. Because what he said was basically, he wrote back to Constantinople saying, I accept what was done at the council, except for where my legates didn't follow my instructions. So, I mean, that is quite a qualification to make. But I think it's best to say that he did not. We can all agree that he believed that the Photian deposition was annulled, if not the whole council.
Well, yeah. Well, for sure, the Photian deposition was annulled, but it sounds like, and this is how I read the documents. It sounds like in the Pope's two letters, he wrote two letters, one to Photius, one to the Emperor, and it sounds like, in terms of accepting 879, he's only accepting the part that reinstates Photius. I'll read the part. We also approve what has been mercifully done in Constantinople by our synodal decree of your reinstatement. And if perchance at the same synod our legates have acted against apostolic instructions, neither do we approve their actions, nor do we attribute any value
Yeah,
to
I
it.
mean, what a qualification, right? Like, come on, can we have a list of what that means?
We already have enough contradictory sources on this issue. That's the last thing we need, this vague qualification. And he
right.
says the same thing in his letter to the emperor. So,
Yeah, and if readers want more on the manuscripts and the vitas, the life ofs, because that's really what a lot of the reconstruction is based off of, a life of Ignatius, and a lot of it is anti-Photian material. But these two books are really where you want to go nowadays. Plus the third one I mentioned with Johann Meyer. These two books are going to be the most up to date on this issue. Montenero, Father Richard Price translated the Acts of 869 to 870. Montenero is the man who does the commentary. I don't think Richard Price is anywhere in the presence of the comments in this book.
and that came out like not too long ago, right?
Yeah, it came out like 3 weeks ago.
Yeah. So not long at all. It's brand new.
Not long ago.
It's be prepared to spend a few bucks on that one.
Yeah, that's why I said have a garage sale. I said that earlier. I said you're gonna have to do something like that because it's $180. But Richard Price is also, I think he's just got done translating the Acts of the Council of 879 to 880, and so that will be out. I don't know who the commentator will be.
Oh,
But
man.
that's the next one, and I'm sure I'm salivating for that one. That's for darn sure. But so I guess we could wrap up this story by saying how at this time, Rome is back into peace with Constantinople. I'm wondering if I should say a word about the filioque at this council. I don't know. I'll let you decide that after. But what I want to say is that it was thought that there was a second schism with Photius,
Yeah,
and
that's
so
the old school belief.
yeah, exactly. It's the belief that Photius entered into a second schism because the new emperor, the successor of Basil, whose name is escaping me. Um, in any case, the next Macedonian emperor, um, he he takes Photius out of office, and Photius is the rest of his life is kind of shrouded. We know that he definitely devoted himself to theology. He wrote his Mystagogy on the Holy Spirit, which is an advancement from his sort of sloppy reputation of Latin doctrine in 867. The Mystagogy is a little bit more organized, um, but it is believed by Devornick that he died in the peace of the church, as testified by some of the epistolary exchanges under the pontificate of Pope Stephen II. And that's it.
Yeah, just a single thing on the Mestagogy. It's kind of irrelevant to the discussion today, but a thing that I find interesting about the Mestagogy is he's trying to show the West that several popes believed, like condemned the filioque. So he quotes Leo, who was a filioquist, ironically, and Agatho, who was also a filioquist. But a thing that is weird, he quotes Pope Vigilius. So that's so weird because that just kind of assumes that, like, at that time in the 9th century, his reputation had been like salvaged or all good all along. It's slightly off topic, but if you want to say something about that
Yeah.
because of this council,
Well, I said it was a little bit more professional than the 867 refutation of Latin doctrines, but I don't think the Mystagogy is a very convincing document. I don't think it's historically
no, it
apt.
isn't.
So he definitely has some historical errors there. But you know what's interesting? For the first time in Byzantine history, I think it was already there though during the Monothelite crisis, but for the first time, you had a Byzantine openly say that many of the fathers, Cyril, Athanasius, Augustine, Ambrose, that they could have all been wrong, and they could have all taught the filioque, and that's not a problem. And I think you don't really see that very much. Like when Saint John of Damascus was talking about the possibility of errors in the fathers, he was like, that's impossible. And even if it was, it would be like an overwhelmingly clear minority. But
Well,
Photius,
like, but like, yeah, that's kind of impossible though, because you have Saint Cyprian and Stephen fighting over a theological issue,
that's right. Yeah.
and they're both fathers. So, like, I've never understood that kind of argument. I'd like if all the fathers agree, and of course, some saints had different canons. But we got some questions in the queue. Shall we?
Yeah, go ahead.
Do any scholars prior to Devornick acknowledge that Photius died in the peace of the church?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
In fact, and a lot of the scholarship that continues to get pumped out, they all attribute this to Devornick.
Oh, interesting. All right, from our good friend John, what attitude did Rome have pre-Vatican II to veneration of Photius?
Oh,
Well,
so this is a study that I've embarked on. The issue of the veneration of Photius, and then more importantly, Gregory Palamas, and then Mark of Ephesus, and some. It seems like some Malachite churches, I think, venerate Mark of Ephesus, and there seems to be a case of the tolerance of no adjustments to the Byzantine their calendar when they came into union, the Union of Brest. There seems to be a toleration, but I've seen some conflicting data. But the literature that I'm getting is all on the online and all these periodicals that are vaguely written like 200 years ago, 100 years ago. So I will not assert anything at this point to this question. But I think that we're going to find something along the lines of there being some sort of unwillingness to venerate Photius before the Pius XII, and that's my best guess at this moment. But please do not quote me. I embarked on this study. I am nowhere even in the thick of it, so I do apologize, John Colarafi.
Yeah, and keep in mind, you got these fringe movements like the Zogbeites, which is technically condemned as heresy, but it's not like when you condemn things, they just evaporate. Like it's slowly dying, but who knows? So yeah, there's a lot of baggage there. But a thing that's interesting, though, I'll bring it up. According to Wikipedia, which I don't think is wrong on this, Photius was only canonized by the Orthodox Church in 1847. So I mean, the fact
Yeah,
that
and I think that it was. I think that this would be. I think that because there was no like Roman approval for certain canonizations. At least I don't think there was. So like some of the saints in the East, by the time Rome added them to the calendar, it was because it was on the strict basis that the East had accepted them. You know, um, how did Saint Gregory Nazianzus end up on the Roman calendar? I think it's just the East. The East immediately venerated Gregory, and the West took it on. It got to a point though where Rome in the second millennium began to demand canonization process to be adjudicated by the Apostolic See, and it could be that Photius never passed through that.
Okay. All right. Here's a question by Elijah. Did Constantinople 879 I think he meant anathematize additions to the creed?
Yes, it did.
Oh, okay. Okay. Is that all? Do you want to add more? Or?
Yeah, I mean, it basically said that any word additions to the creed is it's basically it's just rehearsing what I think what was said at the Council of Chalcedon in its final session, that nobody's to teach another creed
Okay.
than the Constantinople, Neo-Niceno Constantinopolitan Creed. Now, I think that it was well established at this council that um, that the Apostolic See had the power to unlock certain disciplinary judgments of prior councils. That's how they annulled 869. But I think that in the decree itself, it implies that it would be possible to do it. It would just have to be done by another ecumenical council,
Okay.
which I think was done at it was at least it was attempted to be done at the Council of Lyons 1274, and then I think obviously it was done at the Council of Florence.
All right. Next question. If Michael the Third is still alive, all the other things after were happening in the same way. Can you try to clarify that? It's kind of weirded wordly. But yeah, we'll get back to it. Did Roman
I
Constantinople?
think what he said is if Michael III stayed alive, would everything else have happened the same way?
Oh, okay.
No, Basil's the one who moved. He was the mover and shaker. He's the one who um, he was a bridge for peace.
Yeah. All right. Did Rome and Constantinople resolve this issue yet, or is it still ongoing? I mean, I think it's still ongoing, but
So
that's
it
why
all
we have books like.
Yeah, it all depends on what he means. Does he mean the issue of the creed, or does he mean the issue of Photius? Because I
I think
think
he
the
means Photius.
yeah, so there's been no opening of the case. I think that if Rome, if Rome was to look into it, I think that the Council of 879, even though it's not ecumenical, it's still in the historical books. So maybe it still has some sort of value,
Okay.
but not an ecumenical value.
Okay. We got a good question from Father James here. Would there be an argument in the death of Saint Meletius of Antioch, or would you both say he did not die in Schism of Rome? If this is too far off topic, ignored. Do you want to take a stab at this?
Yeah, so I mean, as you know, I wrote a book on the papacy, and I think I've got like 50 pages to the story of Meletios and Flavian and the Council of Constantinople 381. But there seems to have been a I don't know exactly when this happened. Okay, it's not in the 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th centuries, but around the late 18th and in the 19th century, and I think some Protestants pulled up on this. The story of Meletius of Antioch was thought to be an argument against the Catholic Church. And the idea was that here you've got a guy who Rome thought was a schismatic bishop in Antioch. And not only is he considered in good standing in the East, but he's the president of the Second Ecumenical Council that, one of our great councils. And he lived and died happily outside of Rome. This is one of the arguments that you'll see, like in the, obviously, any Anglican who's going to have um, objections, innocent objections to the papacy, they might bring this up. I mean, I used to bring it up, but you'll see it in the literature, like Edward Deeney. You'll see it in Frederick Puller. You'll see it in, boy, I've got a bunch of Anglican books that were written in refutation to the papacy. But one of the things that needs to be understood is that the situation in Antioch was extremely difficult in terms of communication. The origins of Meletios are shrouded in Arian rumor. It was thought that he was an Arian, or somehow um, he started off Arian, but then when it came time for him to, speak at the pulpit, um, in front of Emperor Constantius. I can't remember the name now. Constantine the Second. I can't remember. The Eastern emperor who definitely wanted Antioch to remain semi-Arian. Meletius gets up and gives his interpretation of Proverbs 8, I think, on wisdom, and he proves himself to be a Nicene bishop. And so he's sent into exile, and he'll be sent into exile 2 more times. So it's not like we have a guy here who was happily sitting in Antioch, who you could perfectly write letters to and get letters back from and be in communication with. Um, Meletius did never have an opportunity to have that kind of a back and forth with Rome. What we do know is that Basil tried to act as like an intermediary, because Basil thought that the Westerners, and for them that includes Alexandria. So Athanasius rejected Meletius of Antioch. He didn't think Meletius deserved to be a bishop.
In favor of
And
Paulinus?
um
Was it Paulinus who
it's
was the bishop?
Paulinus. Yeah, it's Paulinus. I just don't know if
Paulinus.
I don't know if Athanasius opted for Paulinus as a candidate, or if he just thought that the see was still vacant. Rome seems to be in support of Paulinus, especially as time goes on in the 370s. Paulinus is a clear Nicene bishop. They're worried in the East of. They're thinking he's a Mars. They think in the East they're suspicious of him because they think he believes in the um, the Sabellianism of Marcellinus of Ancyra. So Paulinus has tensions with people in the East. But the long story short, because we can get real big into the weeds here, there's a synod that's held in 379. The West decides to come to the aid of Antioch. Pope Damasus writes a long letter. Well, it's actually not that long. It's a decree on the deity of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And the Rome sends it signed by Pope Damasus, and it says anybody in the East who agrees to this document has the fellowship of Rome. And so that was sent off in like 378. And when it got into Antioch, they held a council in 379 headed by Meletius. And Meletius signs it.
Yeah, that's what John Colarafi says here. I saw this quote. I thought I'd put this on.
Yes, that's true. I agree with John. And so this gets sent back to Rome, and that's what's preserved in the archives at Rome, is a signature of this document with Meletius's name at the very top. So it's we don't have a lot of good grounds to think that Meletius saw himself as a schismatic from Rome. Now, there is a dispatch that goes on from Emperor Gratian to the east on who does the church properties belong to. Do they belong to the semi-Arians? Do they belong to the Arians? Or do they belong to Meletius? Or do they belong to Paulinus? Or do they belong to the third Orthodox party that Jerome tells us about in his letters to Pope Damasus? Well, this dispatch, he's not a general, but I can't remember the name of it, but Emperor Gratian sends him with instructions on who to give properties in Antioch. All the church properties, all the vessels, the chalices, the chrism, the glass, everything, the episcopal chambers and things like that. Who does that all belong to? And he came with instructions saying that all these properties belong to anybody who holds the communion of Pope Damasus.
Here's what I found on the internet.
So that is, so you've got this dispatch, basically saying that Antioch's the ecclesiastical property goes to the people who hold the communion of Damasus. What does Meletius say? I hold the communion of Damasus. We get this from Jerome. We also get it from Socrates and Theodoret, both historians speaking from different parts of the world. They're, not totally different, but they're in the East, but they're not as, their proximity to Antioch is not the same.
Yeah, I think one's in Constantinople, one's in modern Greece.
Yes, Theodoret of Cyrus, Theodoret. That's we're getting close to farther into the East, but but there's a disagreement because Paulinus says he's holding the communion of Damasus. So then there had been this resolution made that both of them should hold the episcopal throne until one of them dies. And when one of them dies, that one will continue a lineal succession. And they did this because they were both Nicene Christians. They were both holding to a faction in Antioch. So they didn't see how any other way to resolve the conflict other than to make them both coexist as bishop for the time being. We don't know if Rome ever went along with this program. But what we do know is that a synod in Milan accepted the resolution. And it's not crazy to think that Milan conveyed this from, either it was conveyed from Rome to Milan, or Milan conveyed that to Rome, in which case, Meletius, it has no necessary condemnation from Rome. There is no official excommunication of Meletius by Rome. And when Meletius opens up the Council of Constantinople, he doesn't think he's in schism from Rome. For goodness sake, the third canon says that Constantinople will be the second after Rome.
I've never thought of that, making that connection, because if you're in schism from someone and you're trying to make this certain see right below it in reference to it, yeah, I've never thought of it that way. Oh boy, that's clever.
Well,
Is
I have a
there
lot
anything
more
else you want to say?
material. I mean, there's so much. I've got like 50 pages in my book, but I can't I can't let myself go, Alan. I got to stop. So
Okay,
I'll
okay.
stop here.
I'm sure we gave Father James plenty. So, okay. Question here from Deadly Havoc: Has Eric heard of the prophecies attributed to Photius' birth that he would tear up the church? See Catholic Encyclopedia article on Photius. And then he says,
So,
"Is there any historical value?"
I might have come across it. It doesn't ring a bell for me.
Okay, okay. Question here from Elijah: Why did Rome go back to accepting 869 in the 11th century, even though it was annulled due to acceptance of 879? All right, take it away.
Yeah. So, the first thing that needs to be known about these councils is that these were not doctrinal councils. So, nothing dogmatic was done on the matter of doctrine or dogma. No persons were, like in Nicaea 1, they name the perpetrator, Arius, and they condemn his doctrine. Constantinople 2, the Macedonians, Macedonius, he's condemned. All those who reject the deity of the Holy Spirit are condemned. Ephesus 1, Nestorius is named, and he's condemned. Chalcedon, you have Dioscorus is condemned. You've got other ones put on trial. So none of these councils in Constantinople have a heretic that's being examined and a doctrine that's being examined. This has everything to do with the deposition and the rehabilitation of the man Photius. So the temporary 869, we don't really know if it was ever accepted as ecumenical by Rome. See, Elijah Hallberg here, our good friend, I see him often, so he's definitely searching here. So thank you for listening. But there's an assumption in your question, which is that Rome held 869 as ecumenical at some point before the 11th century. And we don't really have evidence of that. In fact, after the Council of 879, we have no evidence that either Rome or the East accepted any of those councils as ecumenical.
Well, yeah, and like again, there's a big question at the end of the Pope's letter, both to Photius and the Emperor, how much of 879 they accept. Do they accept only the part where Photius is rehabilitated, or the part that annuls the council? And I think there's a difference with Father Grumel. I think he said, and I'm going off ancient memory here, that he said like into the 880s, the Greek bishops are still writing to Rome trying to get that council annulled. It's like, well, wait, I thought it had been annulled earlier. There's so many variables in this.
Well,
Like,
yeah. I mean, Photius, the book you have, there's 2 chapters in Devornick's book, and how Elijah, you should get this book. Just read it. It has two whole chapters showing that neither the Greeks or the Latins are referring to any of these councils as ecumenical. So the reason why the Latin Church and eventually adopted the council as ecumenical under Pope Gregory VII is because it had canons disallowing jurisdiction of kings in the matter of episcopal elections, interference of the state with the church. And so Gregory the Seventh really needed canons to be put onto the books in the 11th century, and so he picked up on this council 869 and that referred to it because, I mean, it does style itself as ecumenical. So that's how it got into the books in Rome. And obviously Photius's name is being condemned all throughout that council. So that's how Photius regained the memory of being outside of communion with the West. So, but it's a disciplinary council. So technically speaking, I know this looks very irresponsible, but it can kind of come on or off the books as the church sees fit. There's some canons in the church that are dead or alive. Even in Byzantine canon law, there are some canons that the Orthodox Church does not hold, is still valid today. Like the canons that say you can't go see a Jewish doctor. Is that a dead canon or is that a living canon? Most of the Orthodox I speak to today say it's a dead canon. Well, can you revive it 100 years from now? I'm sure you might be able to. I don't know how that would go, but so when you're dealing with discipline issues, you can have these kind of flip flops, even if they are kind of embarrassing.
Okay, yeah, and I've got if you get this book, it's the registry of Gregory the Seventh. Check out his letter, May 12th, 1077, to Hugh of Dye, about and he talks about he's at the Eighth Council, and exactly it's to do with investiture issues, which were kind of always an issue in the East, but don't become an issue in the West until the time of Pope Gregory. So I think
Elijah has another question at the end there. Yeah, there we go. So yes, Christ had two human souls. That's denied, but that was that. So you got to remember what gets done at a council is not necessarily what's valid. For example, at the Council of 869, Anastasia, the librarian, talks about all these different things that have happened at prior councils, but when it fell back to Rome's lap, it never got ratified sufficiently. So even if you do have a doctrinal inclusion, that doesn't mean it's a doctrinal council. And in Rome, Nicaea II, 787, that was the council that dealt with the issue of icons. So this council's rehearsal of Nicaea II would not be the ecumenical substance on the doctrine of icons. On the matter of the two souls, again, this was not like an issue in Rome where there was a question and there had been some sort of delusional rumor going around that some people in the East held to this view, but there was no traction to that. Nobody in the East held that. Nobody in Rome held that. So yeah, it comes up, but it's definitely not a. There's actually, if you get this book here, he has a whole section on the doctrinal contents. Were there any or were there not in the council? The issue is there doctrinal content that would make for a sticking point of irreformability, such that if it's annulled, we're annulling our doctrine. So, for example, if Rome holds a council next year and rehearses all 21 ecumenical councils, and then says we're adding a new discipline, you got to wear red to church every Sunday, and then 3 years later they completely annul that council, that doesn't mean they're annulling the 21 ecumenical councils that were rehearsed in the council. Do you see?
Yeah, that's a good point. So I'm going to wrap up now. Do you just want to plug your books? I know you've written a few books lately.
So if anybody's interested in the the roller coaster ride of the Filioque, I'm kidding. It's most people don't think of it as fun. I say Filioque and people are like boring. But I wrote a book on the Filioque controversy. It's on Amazon. You could just look up my name. I recommend people give it a read. This is a doctrine that its history and its theological insides are kind of not known in many people's lives. So, why is that important? And how does it relate to the Catholic and the Orthodox debates? I put it all in 400 pages. It's easy to read. It's been revised slightly just for typos. So everything else, there's been no change in content at all. The second book is that I've written is called Melchizedek and the Last Supper, and
there's an entire show on that on this channel,
yeah.
by the way.
Yeah, we did a show. This is basically if you're a Protestant and you want to know the biblical evidence for transubstantiation, get this book. I have a book coming out soon on justification. I wrote it for Protestants on the book of Romans. So I'll definitely let you know, Alan, about that. So maybe I can hop on here and we can talk about that.
Excited about that one. And you have a papacy book coming out.
Yeah, papacy book coming out. I heard back from Emmaus. It's sad. I mean, it's sad because when you're dealing with a publisher, my thoughts were, okay, it's going to be 5 months. No, I turned that manuscript in a while ago, but it takes time. And sometimes editors, it gets passed into different hands and they take their time. It goes under another pile of another editor's works. And until they get to it, it can't go to the next editor. And then until they get to it, it can't. So we're at the end of the finish line is what I'm hearing. Ooh. But I don't know exactly what that means. I thought I was ready. I thought it was ready for Christmas of 2021. I thought it was ready for the spring of 2022. It looks like the summer is probably likely.
All right, and some nice summer reading. Go to the beach, go to the park, and read some papacy book. Hopefully, we'll have it with us. And that's all I have to say. Do you have any last words, Eric, before I kill the stream?
No, thank you for having me on. Hopefully I didn't bore and snore you to death.
Well, certainly not me, but we had
quite I meant the listeners. Yeah.
We had quite a high count. So I think it was pretty good. So okay, I'm gonna kill the stream. Thanks for joining us, and I'll have Eric back to talk about the doctrine of justification in a few weeks or a few months or whatnot. And go buy his books, and you guys have a good day, and God bless.